Hi, I'm Greg Corombos. My guest at this time is Alireza Jafarzadeh. He's Deputy Director of the Washington office of the National Council of Resistance of Iran. He joins us to discuss the coronavirus in Iran, why it got so bad there, and what the long-term consequences might be. And Alireza, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Always a pleasure to be on your show, Greg.
Real quickly, as we begin, Iran was one of the first countries outside of China to really struggle with the virus. So why was Iran one of the first countries where this spread to?
Well, because of the connection with China, to say it in one word, and all the cover-up, all the corruption, all the political gaming that the Iranian regime was doing since day one. Many people may not know that while the virus was expanding in China and it was engulfing Wuhan and other cities, the Iranian regime's Revolutionary Guards owned airline called Mahan Air was having daily flights to 4 different cities in China. And until weeks and weeks after the whole world was talking about the virus and it was spreading everywhere, those airline flights, passenger flights continued to China, taking people to China, but also bringing the Chinese back to Iran, even facilitating some connection flights from China through Iran to other countries. There are some 700 Chinese clergies who study or are actually trained in the theological schools in Qom, the religious center in Qom, and they were the ones who first brought in the virus to the city of Qom, and then the regime found out about it, but they kept silent. For at least 3 weeks, the regime knew about the virus and the cases that had appeared in Qom, but they didn't say a word about it. And not only that, but they repeatedly denied some of the reports that were surfacing, including by some of the regime's own members of parliament who were talking about the existence of the coronavirus in Iran, and the regime kept denying it for 3 weeks. And by the time they conceded to the existence of it, it was already too late because they had refrained from quarantining the city of Qom, and people had traveled, including Revolutionary Guards, from Qom to other cities, and it just spread everywhere. They took no precautionary measures nor actions that was needed to contain the spread of the virus. And then the Revolutionary Guards were thinking about their profits. They continued those flights for weeks, making money out of those flights to China, but also hoarding some of the medical equipment, like the mask, simple things, mask, gloves, and other things, and so that they can jack up the prices and sell it in the black market. And also they were thinking more about the regime's proxies in other countries than the people of Iran. In the midst of the crisis, the Minister of Health of the regime conceded that millions of face masks were sent by the Revolutionary Guards to Iraq to give it to the Hashd-e-Sha'bi. And then they had given a lot of money and resources to these proxy groups they have in Lebanon, in Iraq, in Syria, instead of allocating the money to resolve the crisis. And I think that explains partly to why the virus had spread so vastly in Iran.
Alireza, I read some reports a while back that there was some sharp disagreement between the Ayatollah Khamenei and President Rouhani on what was the right response here. I can't remember which one had which position, but one thought you needed a very aggressive approach to get people to stay home, and the other position was that it'll play out, don't need to change much. Is that what really happened?
Well, there's a lot of infighting going on among the regime's officials, whether it's Khamenei and Rouhani and others, because and the reason for the fighting is not really about which solution is better to resolve the issue. It's more about who can actually reap more benefits out of this, who can actually gain political benefits out of this, and when it comes to the blame game. which party is going to put the blame on the other side. Rouhani, who is the regime's president, constantly comes on television and press conference and other things, basically claiming that things are not as bad as everybody else is saying, oh, we have everything, all the hospitals are fine, we have all the things that we actually need. We are actually able to export medical equipment to other countries, including the United States, believe it or not. They're making those claims, but at the same time, they're trying to use the opportunity of the coronavirus crisis to resolve their political problems in the international community, namely the issue of the sanctions. The regime has waged a very extensive campaign, both in Europe and particularly in the United States, to leverage the corona issue to lift the sanctions on the Iran regime and create more resources and funds for the Revolutionary Guards.
And to a large extent, it seems it's been successful. I know they were holding off for a long time in easing the sanctions, but it seems at least some of those have been lifted temporarily. Is that correct?
Some of the Europeans are actually helping the regime using the inflict system to provide materials and everything for the Iran regime. But, the reality is that, first of all, the regime does not lack resources or money. So that's the number one thing, because just think about it. Some of those foundations and institutions controlled by the supreme leader and the Revolutionary Guards have huge amount of money and resources controlled by them. I just named four of those foundations. One of them is Setad, which is the foundation created shortly after the revolution, entirely controlled by Khamenei, and it has over $100 billion of money and resources, mostly confiscated from the people, the poor people. And then you have the Astan-e-Quds Foundation, which is basically in the city of Mashhad, the second most populated city of Iran, that under religious cover, it has hundreds of billions of dollars and resources and assets. And then you have the foundations, the Co-op Foundation of the Revolutionary Guards, and they have the Mostazafan Foundation, and Khatam al-Anbiya Garrison, the largest construction company in the whole Middle East, all controlled and owned by the Revolutionary Guards, with hundreds of billions of dollars and resources. Not even a single dollar of those resources have so far been allocated to the needy people as we speak. And, they could have easily done that. They have the fund, the special fund that is supposed to be allocated for circumstances like this, with over $40 billion of resources, and which they, regularly use to fund the militias in Iraq and the Quds Force, and, to support terrorism. Not even a single dollar of that fund by the National Development Fund of Iran, as I said, not even a single dollar of the $40 billion has been allocated to the corona thing. So that's a big lie that the regime says that the sanctions are actually killing people in Iran. Second, in terms of medical equipment, they're not sanctioned at all. People can easily send, medical equipment, all of the medical needs. Not only the regime doesn't really doesn't really lack them, but the regime actually refused outside help, including by Doctors Without Borders, that expelled a team of physicians from Iran. They rejected the offer by the United States, who has repeatedly said that we'll provide you anything from ventilators to masks, whatever you need, but the regime has rejected that. And then the regime is hoarding these medical equipment to gain money. So in one word, the regime is what they call corona diplomacy. They're playing this game of corona diplomacy to resolve the issues that they couldn't resolve otherwise. And all of this is to the detriment of the people of Iran, because the regime, instead of thinking about the people of Iran, thinking about how to resolve the issue, they're going after people who are putting out facts. They have arrested and jailed a number of people who have given information about the actual number of people who have died. They don't care about those prisoners in Iran. This virus is spreading among many of the prisons all over the country, to the point that the prisoners are rebelling. And in nearly a dozen cities over the past week, the prisoners have rebelled against the guards and others who take no precautionary measures against them, and they're contracting coronavirus very rapidly. In the city of Tabriz, in Ahvaz, in Shiraz, in Saqqez, in Hamadan, a number of other cities, the prisoners were basically revolting against that. So that's the crisis that we should fully understand, that the regime, this is really one more reason for the people of Iran to want to overthrow the Ayatollahs. Remember back in November of 2019, in January 2020, there were widespread demonstrations by the people against the regime, calling, the death to Khamenei, death to Rouhani, death to dictator. They're saying the enemy is right here. They lie when they say it's America. And now this corona crisis and the way the regime has handled it, and leading to many deaths, thousands of deaths of the Iranian people just feel like once again that there is only one solution for the future of Iran, and that's the end of the rule of the mullahs.
Last question here, Alireza, and you led right into it by talking about the demonstrations that had been happening. Now, of course, I assume there's not as much of a robust presence in the streets, but do you think there's a lot more people who are going to be for regime change now than were just a few months ago, or will we essentially see the same people once again with another reason calling for regime change?
I think there is definitely more people who are convinced that the solution for Iran is regime change, because now look at the situation. Every single person in Iran, regardless of political affiliation or political activism, are affected by this situation, and they all understand and rightly regard the regime in its entirety, especially the supreme leader and the Revolutionary Guards, as responsible for their misery, as responsible for their carelessness about the thing. This is a regime that intervenes in the most personal aspects of the life of the citizen. You can't even, have a party in your own home, yet, and they attack like private parties and places and arrest people. Yet, when there is a crisis this big, the regime is nowhere to be found. The help is nowhere to come from the regime for the people. That's why you have more layers of the society with the utmost anger against the regime. Now, you don't see it in the streets every day because of the situation. Of course, people cannot come out, but that doesn't mean that the anger is not there. To the contrary, I believe, especially when you look at the social media and you see the video clips that people are recording and sharing in this crisis situation, that it's just like that anger is just piling up. It's like more water behind the dam. And once this issue is over, or even before that, who knows, this whole thing might collapse big time against the regime, and there's going to be a limit to the tolerance of the people, and the regime is not going to get away with the crimes really they have done against that in facilitating the spread of the coronavirus, and their carelessness in resolving the issue. And that's why I feel not only those people who were in the streets before continue the same desire for change in Iran, but you have added layers of the society. Just look at the physicians, the nurses, the medical teams who are working round the clock with very little help by the Iran regime. These are all like new layers of the society who are adding to the people who are already there calling for change in Iran.
Alireza, a very thorough explanation of what we're seeing in Iran. We appreciate it very much because, as you well know, it's hard for that information to get out. But obviously, the resistance inside Iran is able to report things that the media cannot. So thank you very much for your time today. We truly appreciate it, as always.
Thank you so much, Greg. I really appreciate it. And I believe this is an important time for the American public to understand this, that, any medical assistance that is going to go to Iran, it should go directly to the people of Iran, not to the regime. And this is not the time to relieve or ease any of the sanctions, because it will only benefit the Revolutionary Guards and further threaten the lives of the citizens and further prolong the rule of the mullahs. Thank you so much, Greg.
You're most welcome. Alireza Jafarzadeh, Deputy Director of the Washington Office of the National Council of Resistance of Iran. I'm Greg Corombos reporting for Radio America.